Hi Bookish Besties, my name is Brittany. This is Rescues and Reads. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you are new, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're already subscribed, as always, I appreciate your continued support. Thank you for returning to another video. Today, I'm here to do a Q&A answering your questions for me. So if y'all remember, back in October, I finally completed the round of TBR gameplay that I have been playing since late 2022. It took me about 2 years to complete the round of gameplay with all of the colors and things of that nature. And in celebration, I offered a giveaway. And in order to enter that giveaway, you had to ask me a question you wanted me to answer. It could be bookish, it didn't have to be bookish, it could have been whatever you wanted. And I actually got quite an amazing response to that video. I had a lot of questions asked of me. I'm not going to have time to answer them all here today. I think I'm probably going to cut this off at about 30 minutes of answering questions, but I'm going to get to as many of them as I possibly can. I honestly have not looked at any of these, so I have no idea what is coming. I'm just going to kind of scroll through and answer them in the order that they pop up for me. So the first one that I have here is from Amanda's Booktopia. It says, here's my question. What advice would you give to small booktubers that could possibly help them succeed? So I've mentioned this video already recently, but I did a video all about advice for people who want to start a booktube channel, and I think I'm going to go ahead and refer back to that. But I would say that some of my main tips are, first of all, just to be consistent and do what you can do, but do it well. Try to film in a space that is quiet, a space that has decent lighting. Essentially put effort into what you are filming and what you are editing. Take the time to do it correctly. Booktube can be a very time-consuming labor of love. It is ultimately a hobby for many of us. A lot of us do not make hardly any, if any, money from doing what we do. So it can seem a little bit difficult to invest so much time into something that might not necessarily be giving you the returns that you want to see. But if you are consistent, if you are doing what you do well, you are eventually going to see that growth. You are eventually going to get the attention that you deserve. And similarly, I would say don't be afraid to interact with the content creators that you watch. Make sure to regularly comment on their videos and be an active part of the booktube community, because then it's returned to you. You get your name and your face out there. People see your comments. Maybe they're a little bit curious about you and then they go over to your channel. Maybe you are a part of Patreon discords and so people know you from there. Just be an active and open member of the booktube community and just put effort into the content that you are creating. It is going to show and it's going to make people more invested in you and your channel. Nancy Picard 3456 asks, have you always been a reader even as a child, or did you become a reader as an adult? I have been a reader for as long as I can remember. My mom was a reader and I'm pretty sure that I picked it up from her. When I was younger, I read voraciously and I read physically all the time. I read dozens and dozens and dozens of books a year, and then things really derailed when I hit my late teens and I graduated high school and I got into college and I was more interested in working and dating and all of that stuff and all of the distractions that came with life. And there was a good, I want to say probably about 10 years where I was barely reading at all. And then when I graduated, I got back into reading and I have figured a way to read even though I can't really read physically anymore. My concentration is shot. My husband is convinced I have ADHD. I don't know, but I basically cannot sit down and concentrate on a book. Even if I'm reading something immersively, I can only do it for maybe 20 or 30 minutes before I'm absolutely done and have to move on to something else. There's always something else that I could or need to be doing. The short answer to your question is yes, I have always been a reader. It's just that there was a time in my life where I was reading hardly anything at all. Rowena Potter 895 asks, why did you choose the game Sorry as your TBR game? So Sorry was always my favorite game as a kid. I used to absolutely love playing Sorry when I was a girl. Green was always my color and I used to be the sorest loser. I used to absolutely hate when anybody beat me at that game. But when I was trying to think of a way to create a TBR game of my own, because they are definitely all the rage in the online bookish community, I couldn't think of a better way to do a TBR game than to do it based on Sorry, just because of my love of it. So that's why. Melissa.Britton asks, what is your favorite hobby / activity to do while you're listening to an audiobook? So back in the day when I actually had the time to do this, I loved to diamond paint. Diamond painting was my favorite activity to do while listening to an audiobook. It is basically mindless creativity and I absolutely loved it. I did a lot during COVID, but then when I decided to start back up my booktube channel, this has kind of taken precedence over that. You know, whenever I have any downtime or anything like that, I'm always editing a video because I have such limited time in the day to do it. So I really do not have the extra time to go ahead and dedicate to diamond painting. And that's a shame because I really, really miss it and I would love to get back to it someday. But currently the main thing that I do when I'm listening to audiobooks are chores. When I'm commuting to and from work, I'm listening to an audiobook. When I'm doing the dishes, when I'm doing the laundry, basically anything that I don't have to think too terribly hard about, I am listening to an audiobook. I will say that I know a lot of booktubers who put together puzzles while they are listening to audiobooks. I know a lot of booktubers who knit or crochet while they are listening to audiobooks. There are a lot of mindless crafty type activities that you can do while listening to audiobooks. Prima Diva SM0520 asks, can you tell me what part of the country you are from? Can you tell me more about the group you moderate on Goodreads? Yes, absolutely. So I'm actually from the West Coast. I was born and raised in California. I moved up to Vancouver, Washington in 2014. I worked in Oregon for about 3.5 years before eventually moving out here to where I am currently in Mississippi. And in terms of the group on Goodreads, it is called the Bookworm Bitches. It is not a group that I created. It was created many years ago. I found it in 2021, 2022, and they had a call for moderators because one of the moderators could not moderate it anymore. And so that's when I asked and I was made the moderator. And now I'm essentially the only one. Like all of the other active moderators are gone and it is just me. I've been able to do a lot with the group that wasn't already done. Like I've completely organized it and deleted a lot of old posts, and I've actually implemented a Discord for the group that they didn't have before. And I feel like that's a much easier way for us all to chat as a group rather than through the Goodreads group. And we have one book that we read a month. Everybody gets to nominate something and then we put up a poll. People vote on it. And we also have yearly and quarterly reading challenges that we do and things like that. So I've really enjoyed being a moderator. I've been a moderator for it over a year at this point, and I plan on continuing to do it. So if you are interested, I will try to remember to leave the link down below to join the Goodreads group or the Discord. Books and Frogs asked, if you could go back and read a book for the first time, what would you choose? So I actually have an entire video I made about the books that I would sell my soul to read again for the first time, but I really don't think that there's any better answer that I could give than to read Harry Potter for the first time. However, this would be complicated because I discovered Harry Potter right when they were being published. The first 3 books were published around 1997, I believe, and I discovered them in 1999. Obviously, at the time, I was still a young child. I was 11, 12 years old. And so there's definitely going to be something different about experiencing those books for the first time as an 11, 12-year-old and then reading the books and experiencing them now for the first time as an adult. But an answer that's probably a little bit less complicated would be The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I absolutely adore that book. I would love to be able to just experience it for the first time again and have all of the same emotions that I had the first time while reading that one. Sheila Sanchez blog asked, are you planning to keep your TBR game the same for the next round, or are you planning to make any changes? So I'm going to keep the board pretty much the same just because I only recently redid the board and they are a pain in the butt to do, y'all. So it's going to be at least probably another year before I update that board. However, I do plan on making changes to the rules of the game and some of the things that are associated with each card that I pull, if that makes sense. So there are definitely going to be some changes coming to the game in 2025, and I'm very excited. I'm extremely excited to start the first round of gameplay for 2025, and that video will be up at the end of December. There have been a couple of questions here asking about advice for a new / aspiring booktuber, and once again, I'm going to kind of direct y'all to that video I made a few months ago about how to start a booktube channel, because I feel like that encompasses a lot of what I feel a new booktuber should know, or basically all the information that I have for a new booktuber. I will leave that video linked down below for you as well. Okay, so my friend Jarrett has some good questions. She asked, what book did booktube convince you to read that you regret? And what book did booktube convince you to read that you loved? So the ones off the top of my head that I loved, I would say are Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, and Apprentice to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. Those are the 3 that come to me off the top of my head. Books that booktube convinced me to read that I regret. Ooh, this is hard because I have to think of books that I actually completed, that I regret completing, not that I DNF'd, that I actually completed. I would say Demon Copperhead is potentially one, just because I had such a negative reading experience with that book, and for all intents and purposes, it should have been a book that I love, and I just really didn't. Daisy Darker is probably another example of this. I had read another book by Alice Feeney that booktube convinced me to read, and I enjoyed it for the most part, so I picked up Daisy Darker, and I absolutely could not stand that book. Twisted Love is another one. Y'all know how I feel about that book. I absolutely hated that book. I definitely regret that one, but for the most part, I can't really think of books that I outright regret reading. There might be books that I really didn't enjoy reading, but I typically don't regret any book that I read because it's a book that I read, I experienced it, and now I know for next time, like, not to pick up that book or that author or things like that. So they're all learning experiences. Average Jess 1670 asks, how are your fur babies? Miss seeing them in vlogs. Well, I'm pretty sure that this video is going to go up after the booktube myths video, and if you watch that video, you will see how Archie is doing. He is a pain in my damn butt and made that video absolutely chaos. In fact, he is right here right now. So all of the fur babies are perfectly normal and just fine. Sweet Tea Reads asks, is your husband also a reader? reader. How do you all navigate reading while still making time for each other? So my husband is not really a reader. He has a handful of authors that he enjoys and he will read any new release that they put out, but he is not really a super active reader. Gaming is really his thing. So he has a man cave, he has all of his setup in there. He consistently is in there playing games, especially playing games with his brother who lives in Texas. So that is his pastime, that is his release. That's where he goes when he needs to unwind, relax. Now, because my reading occurs via audio, my reading life doesn't necessarily interfere with our time together. I would say booktube content creation would interfere with our time together because I'm either filming a video or editing a video at any given point. For the most part, I would say my husband and I are fairly independent people. I definitely more so than him. His love language is definitely more quality time and mine is more like acts of service. And so we've had to find a way to like navigate the differences in our love languages. He and I both work full time outside the home Monday through Friday. So during the week, our quality time typically comes at night after I've cooked dinner. We are typically watching a show together at any given point. And so after dinner, we will sit down and we will watch an episode of whatever show we are watching. And then we also take our dogs for a walk every single night. And so that typically takes about 20 minutes where we are just out there together chatting. We have some of our best / silliest conversations when we are out there walking the dogs. On the weekends, it's a little bit easier. We are usually always running around doing something. We are going someplace, we are running errands. And so we get our quality time together that way, or we'll have like movie nights where we just sit and watch a movie for no apparent reason other than just to have that escape, have that quality time together. And there are weekends where we don't leave our house, but yet we also are just always doing our own thing. And that is okay too. I really feel it's important for married couples to have their own individual hobbies and interests. We are definitely very understanding of each other's individual interests and what we want to do at any given point. It's just about balancing and priorities. Fawn Over Books asks, what is your reading schedule? My reading schedule is listening literally any opportunity that I have a moment to listen. I typically start my listening for the day when I'm getting ready for work. I will then listen on the way to work. I will also listen on the way to the gym and then on the way home from the gym. I will listen when I am cooking dinner. I will listen when I'm cleaning up the after dinner mess. I'm definitely listening on the weekends when I'm doing all of the chores that don't get done during the week. If I ever have any downtime where literally nothing else is expected of me, there's nothing else that I could possibly be doing, sometimes I will just sit at my desk and I will turn on the audiobook and maybe do some coloring or journaling or something like that. Now, if I am reading a fantasy book and I'm doing so immersively, that typically happens on my lunch break. So I will spend 20 to 30 minutes of my lunch break immersively reading, and that is how I consume that type of content. Chrissy Reads asks, where does the name of your channel come from? It literally just comes from my two biggest passions, animals and reading. My channel used to be named The Continuing Chronicles. That is how it was right up until I came back. And because at that time I had made the decision that I was going to try to pursue a career working with animals in some form, I wanted my booktube channel to also reflect that. I wanted to somehow incorporate my love of animals, my dedication to animal welfare and animal advocacy into this channel, because I knew in some way, shape, or form, should my life ever head in that direction, like if I decided to foster animals or rescue animals or something like that, that would also be incorporated into my regular channel content, especially like in vlog format. And so I went ahead and just completely rebranded, and that's where Rescues and Reads comes from. And that's also especially true since all of my animals are rescues and they are also featured heavily on my channel. So I incorporated them into the title as well. Edwina Fernandez 5018 asks, how do you receive your advanced readers copies of upcoming books? I do not actively seek out ARCs. I am really not interested in being the first in line for advanced reader copies, especially if they do not have an audiobook. Even still, there are so many other books that I need to be prioritizing and reading. I do not need to be the first on that new release, especially if I'm not quite ready to read it. I don't want to request something that I'm not going to be reading immediately. I feel like that's how a lot of people get into trouble with NetGalley and all of that stuff. If there was a book that I was absolutely dying to read, I would need to be in a place where I could read it at the moment that I got it. That is just not really something that I find is important to me. Rogue Rosie asks, what is my favorite animal and dinosaur? I am obsessed with basically all animals, but if I had to choose one animal to cuddle for the rest of my life, it would probably be a big cat of some type, probably a panther. I love, love, love wild cats. My dream, my ultimate dream, if I could do absolutely anything in this world, would be to work at a big cat sanctuary. But I'm also absolutely obsessed with octopuses. I'm obsessed with frogs. I'm obsessed with flamingos. I am obsessed with a wide array of wildlife, and my husband is 100% convinced that the way I die is by scritching something I am not supposed to scritch. In terms of dinosaur, I would say my favorite dinosaur is probably the Brachiosaurus, because he is a handsome boy who is also an herbivore, such as myself. Always Book asks, what do you do for work? So I'm an academic advisor with a local local university. I have been doing that now for 5.5 years. It'll be 6 years in March. Regina Beecher 17 says, do you do volunteer work with any animal rescues and how many pets do you have? So unfortunately I don't, not at this time. I did briefly work for the Humane Society here every single Sunday. I did that for about 3.5, 4 months, but unfortunately it was very physically and emotionally draining. I had a really hard time with some of the operational practices there, and I had an even harder time when I found out what happened to the euthanized dogs, and I could not be in that space. Now I will say that I feel like my local Humane Society does some amazing work. They are truly dedicated to curbing the homeless pet population where I am. I believe that they are doing what they can with the limited resources that they have, and that was part of the problem. They had such limited resources, so they were always limited on staff. They were constantly losing staff, and so I didn't feel like the place was run as efficiently as it should have been. I didn't feel like the place was as clean as it should have been. I felt like there were a lot of dogs in cages that were too small for them, and I felt like there were so many changes that need to be made, and it was difficult being there just as a contract employee that had no voice to say anything. You know what I mean? So it was just so emotionally draining, and I could not sustain working a full-time job and being there, especially since at the same time I was starting the grad program. So I wasn't able to do all of that at once. So unfortunately, no, but my ultimate goal is to be my own rescue organization. My goal is to eventually have a space where I'm able to take in at least a handful of dogs at a time. And I also want to focus primarily on neonatal kittens because there are no resources for neonatal kittens out there. So I want to be a resource. So that is the ultimate goal, but we would need the space in order to facilitate rescuing and fostering more animals. But eventually what I would like to be able to do is to increase this community and social media following in general in a way that would allow me to more heavily focus on rescuing, fostering, etc. Or Elsa82 asks, what extracurricular activities were you involved in as a high schooler? And none. And that is because I was homeschooled throughout high school, or basically it was an independent study program where essentially I did all my work and I met with a teacher once a week who then assigned me more work. And that was the extent of that experience. And I was able to do everything so quickly that I graduated high school a year early and then immediately went to my community college where I proceeded to goof around and not take anything seriously for a couple of years. But that is beside the point of this question. My answer to this is that I did not have any extracurricular activities, although I was a bowler for many years of my life from a young child up until my early 20s. That is because my dad is an avid bowler. He was in the local bowling hall of fame. He had an opportunity to go pro. So like he was a pretty big bowler guy, and I did it when I was younger. So that was, I would say, like the main extracurricular thing that I did for myself outside of school and working. All right, Jill Tatro 9329 asks, what is my favorite nostalgia fandom? And I think I'm just gonna have to go with Buffy the Vampire Slayer on this. I absolutely love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, even though I have not watched an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer in probably a decade. I discovered Buffy late. I discovered it in late 2003, and it instantly became a comfort show for me. I was 15 at the time. I was going through some pretty difficult things with my family situation. It was just something that I latched onto and never let go of, and I ended up rewatching it a couple of times after that. It also became like a breakup show for me. Like anytime I was going through a difficult time, I just turned on Buffy. And so it has been many years since I've watched an episode of that show, but that show means so much to me and it's so influential to me that it is still considered to me to be one of my favorite shows of all time. It's why I have the Slayer Fest readathon, and I do plan on rewatching it with my husband. We have added it to our popsicle stick system, so it'll eventually come up, and I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited to be back with those characters. So if I had to pick a nostalgia fandom, it would be that one. Bibliochemist 1623 says, what's a book that you love but you never hear anyone talk about? So the first book that popped into my head that I loved, that I really don't hear anybody talk about, and it's a pretty new release, that is The Collected Regrets of Clover by Mickey Brammer. I got that as a book of the month selection last year, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It's a story about a death doula who really put her life on hold to be a death doula. She hasn't had any experiences. She's in her mid-30s. She's never been in love. She's never been kissed. She's never had any of that. And after her grandpa died when she was young, she made the decision to become a death doula so nobody else would ever be alone when they died. And that's just what she's dedicated her life to, and she feels it's a great honor and privilege to be there next to people as they die. And she records their last words, you know, whether it's a piece of advice, whether it's a regret, she keeps those in diaries and she refers back to them, and they all mean something to her. So I would say that she has a very important job, but like I said, she's put her life on hold. She's kind of stagnated. And this book is not just about her profession, but it's about her actually living her life again. And I think it's an incredibly underrated book. And I think that a lot of people could get some value out of it. There's a lot of talk about how we as Americans fear death so much that we don't talk about it. And it's almost like a taboo subject. Like, no, you can't talk about death, because if you talk about death, like you're going to bring death on, you know, like you're going to summon death or something like that. No, I really enjoyed that story. story and I wish more people talked about it. All right, everyone. Well, I am now over my 30 minutes and my memory card is once again full. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. I'm so terribly sorry if I didn't get to any of your questions. Please feel free to leave any additional questions in the comments down below and I will be happy to answer them for you there. Or if you made it to the end of this video and you are not feeling chatty, just go ahead and leave me a question mark emoji in honor of the questions answered here today. And as always, if you like this video or if you just like me, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. Throughout the month of December, from December 1st through December 25th, I'm aiming to bring you one video every single day leading up to Christmas. So if you don't want to miss out on any of that content or chaos, please be sure to hit that subscribe button because I would love to connect with you in any of those future videos or on any of my other social media platforms, which you can always find linked down below along with any books featured in the video. Until next time, y'all, bye.